Mitch, I know we're looking for a working title, but we cannot name the podcast The Business of Theater. Looks like we made it.
And especially because it wouldn't be accurate. Although
It's more of
we're
a
here.
question.
We are here. We are here.
It's more of a question. Did we make it? We made it? We made it to 2026. I mean, I guess we could pat ourselves on the back for just some incremental progress of getting here.
Yeah, time moves with or without us. All right.
Yeah, the world would have gotten here whether we had come with it or not.
And Steve Sondheim's advice: move on.
Move on. Yeah,
That's it.
that's
You
it.
can't
All
worry
right.
about the rest of the world. Just move on.
Episode accomplished. Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the Business of Theater, a working title. I'm Darnell Radford,
I'm Mitch Weiss.
and let's get down to business. Yes, it is 2026. This is our first episode of 2026. There's a lot going on. As we're recording yesterday, the Golden Globes were on TV. The winners have been announced. There's a handful of winners who have Broadway credits that have been acknowledged. But the thing is, the question is always, because that's about film and TV, and even though those artists cross over, how many theater people are actually watching?
Well, I would think more than should be. Look, over the past decade, there have been a lot of reports about losing writers to television, people who should be our new playwrights with their own unique voices, and everyone's got to make a living. We've also lost actors. We've lost managers to the pandemic who are not coming back. And we have a lot of negativity. I guess I should start with a report. Sunday morning had CBS Sunday morning on February 4th, January 4th. Hello, we're already jumping into the next
We're
month.
already jumping the gun.
January 4th had a report. Noah Wiley, the television actor from ER and now the award winning, the Golden Globe winning, was talking about why he agreed to do another medical show. And he went back to the days of the pandemic when he realized, I'm not doing this for the money. There's a community here. There's a work, a feeling of joy in the work that there's nothing else I want to do. And even though for the pandemic he couldn't work at all, and then of course he talked about the strike, the SAG-AFTRA strike, and how that gave him the same feeling. What am I doing with my life if I can't do what it is I love doing? And
Yeah.
you were talking about negativity and stuff. Think of how positive that is. We, unlike those people who have to, put string beans in cans at factories, we are doing something that we potentially love doing. Not always. Sometimes there are bad moments, but he also talked about it. It sounded to me like PTSD. The pandemic really shook us to our limbs. We were no longer essential. Nobody cared about saving us, although there was a great deal of government money eventually sent into various larger nonprofits to keep their doors open. But again, negativity, that money often went to pay the salaries of their top 1% and not to keep really the theater open. So, okay, I'm going all over the place because Noah Wiley, who I really personally don't care anything about one way or the other, really said I think, some very emotionally important things about who we are and the reason why theater people would watch the Golden Globes. We are in the entertainment creation business. And God, is that wonderful. It's just exciting, but we fell down or we were pushed. And getting up we have a lot of scarred knees and elbows and bruises on our face and back pains and all sorts of things from that pandemic. And I guess for television, the SAG-AFTRA strike. I think we're first realizing how damaged we are.
Yeah. it is kinda interesting. It does feel like we have to work harder to get people's attention now.
Mhm.
We talk about it all the time. In 2019, it felt like there was an abundance of theater for us to choose from, and we didn't have to necessarily plan in advance for it. I think, the subscription model has been struggling for a long time. But, at that time where it was fruitful, it's that people were saying, I want to make space for all of this, which is why I'm going to subscribe. I need to try to lock these in so I can see how much room I have for other things. But now the mindset is that I don't have the capacity for any of this really.
It's you either prove to me you're worth seeing, or I'm not gonna bother to get out of my comfortable living room watching television,
Yeah.
and that has shaken up, I've the very heart of our community. That's the way I look at it. I talking to people that I know adore theater and wanna go, the prices are astronomical. They can give us every reason in the book why there's a legitimate reason to charge those prices, but nevertheless, they're still ridiculously high. Today, I'm very upset. I'm afraid to name the theater, but there's a theater that always had subsidized tickets, guaranteed being off Broadway with
Mhm.
original pieces and supporting new artists and writers. uh, let's just use as an example, their top price was all shows, all seats, $39. Now, we knew they were subsidized, but it was off Broadway and they were reasonable in what their sets looked like, etc. Now, today they announced the price for their next show starts at $49 and goes up to $129 in the same house of 199 seats. And we're talking about 30 years of guaranteeing all prices are either at one point they were $29, then they bumped up to 39, and now they are a full range of prices up to 129 as of this morning. We're in
Mm.
trouble. And that's not, I mean, again, I'm not angry with them. They have to do what they have to do.
Yeah.
But that's not our heart. That's not There are people who need to see theater, and they can't afford $129. And the $49 seats, by the way, I looked it up, they were obstructed views.
Mm.
That's sad.
Still at that price, yeah. I saw something the other day. I would have to go back to I think it may have been Instagram or YouTube, but it was a short. It was like a story or a reel. It was on one of those, but there's been a couple of these that have been very theater specific but one was saying what we already know. It's like an artist doesn't need a theater in order to, you know, create, to be an artist,
Right.
to do their work. They don't need that infrastructure particularly to do it. But it's hard to assemble a following, an audience, a patronage without the infrastructure. And so sometimes it's tough to say which one matters the most because they all matter. They all support the work in general. There's always this thing like the people who give you money want to put their name on something. They don't want to put their name on, an HVAC system that made it more comfortable to be in the space. They may put their name on some chairs, but they don't wanna give you money so that you can
Right.
get new
And it's
chairs.
not enough. And that kind
Yeah.
of payment. But let's take it a step further because in my head, I'm stuck on this image of PTSD that we
Mhm.
went through a battle and we lost. We
Yeah.
lost. We're still here. Yay, 2026. But we
We
lost.
got through all of last
There you
year,
go.
and we're here.
And we're here. Why is it that people who have dedicated their lives to this industry can't get paid a decent wage? And I think the pandemic brought that home. Before that, there was this element of, I'll work for free, I'll work for next to nothing, I want to be part of all these projects. And the people who are doing that now, who still will do it, are going, but I no longer have the time to do it because my rent is so high
Yeah.
and my expenses are so high, and that's not inflation by itself. There is something that has turned us all around. Theater costs so much. Why is that? It's not the salaries. Some people I've heard say it's the number of people we have to hire to put on a show. So in that sense, it's the salaries. No one
I
person's
mean,
getting that much.
it it is very interesting because if you have a 50-seat house, I guess it's more of a question. If you have a 50-seat house, could you, in theory, run a show longer because you can only accommodate 50 people? Or is it not cost effective to have a smaller house so that the show can run longer and give people more of a chance to come see it?
But who are you paying and how little? You know,
I
it
know.
still comes down to even if you do 8 shows a week, which is somewhat abusive. We've talked about that for decades, about
Yeah.
why are we doing 8 shows a week with 1 day off? Every other profession gets a weekend or 2 days off. Theater gives you 1 day, and depending on your job, you're often doing work for the show on your day off and not getting paid for it. So we dedicate that kind of work. So why shouldn't we be able to pay rent? And we don't. Off Broadway, especially, nonprofit, especially. Broadway pays a good salary, but when you deduct between taxes and your manager and the classes you've taken and your health care and the chiropractor you need because you've been dancing for the wrong way on a rate stage, you put
Through
all that
life.
together, you're going home, and somebody did the math. One particular show, a $2,700 actor went home with $1,600 a week. That is $6,400 a month. If your rent in New York is between 3 and 4,000, which is common, how much does that leave you to do anything else? You can't take a
Yeah.
vacation. You pay.
And if you're not the one doing it, but you're somebody who's saying, "Well, maybe you need a roommate or 4." And it's like, that's easy for you to say, of
And of
course,
course we do
but,
that.
like but the craft requires a little bit of focus,
Mhm.
uh, requires, like, wellness, there's a lot that you need to do, like, we talk about this Broadway body, you know? There's a there's an upkeep to, allow you to run 8 shows a week. There's people who are on vocal rest. They can't go work at a frontline job and, run their mouth all day, and they've gotta keep they gotta keep their voice intact for, a show in the
And
evening.
if you're rehearsing 40 hours a week, when do you study your lines? That's in
Mm,
addition, and nobody's paying you for that, right? If you have to learn dances on your own, I mean, yes, you go in rehearsal room and you'll learn it with everyone, but you gotta go home and practice it
yeah.
because they expect you come back tomorrow, you better know what you just learned. That's the way we all talk to each other.
Well, it's interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the way the contracts are, it doesn't even matter if you're in a long running show. You're still considered you're a contractor,
Absolutely.
you're a part-time employee. I mean, this
Mhm.
isn't really the full-time structure. Like, if you think
Except
about like a
except for a union role on Broadway. That
yeah,
that has healthcare and pension, but it is the only place, right? And that's the irony of this. We have 41 theaters in New York, and everybody else is on their own, right? So if you get a long-running Broadway show, okay, you have a little bit of stability, but then you also have boredom. This is a factory job. You are going back
yeah,
8 times a week, and you're expected to be absolutely perfect in your dancing, singing, and acting, and putting on your makeup and dealing with your costume, and you're only getting 1 day off a week where you can barely take care of your laundry, right, and your grocery shopping. And of course I can hear everyone saying, well, if you're complaining, go take another job. Lawyers have to work 7 days a week. It's true. So it's not that. We're
Yeah.
doing what we love.
Which,
But
if you were to
lawyers make money in addition to that, right?
classify it as a white collar or a blue collar job, what is a
It depends. Well, an actor, that's a good actor's more blue collar. The backstage is more white collar. It's a mixture.
yeah. Well, the difference is like a lawyer is white collar. They're using their brain
Hmm.
and resources, of course, to accomplish their job. But an actor is using their body, and their body is taking a toll.
And their brain,
You
by the
got to
way, and their brain.
Yeah, and it's not just 8 hours a day. You got to give your body time to rest and recover to get back there. But in the process, sure, they might be in this show. If it's a musical, they might have 4 or 5 hours wrapped around each performance, like in terms of getting there and getting situated, like the length of the show, and then like sort of the wind down after. Maybe they can walk right out, skip the stage door, maybe, or something. I don't know. But even if they do want to spend some time to meet the people who bought these tickets, come see the show, all that is part of this job too. And even though it sounds glamorous to someone who's not doing it, but if you've ever been on that line at the stage door waiting to see your favorite actor in the show, they are drained. Like, they look it. It's on their face. You're just like, "I don't wanna take up too much of your time. I just wanna say what a great show. Sign my playbill."
Except there are crazy people at that door, and some of them
Yeah.
literally, like the old joke from Bye Bye Birdie, they try to rip your clothes off. And there are people who will push other people out of the way. There are as many rude, crazy people at that stage door as most of them are wonderful and nice and really are happy to see it. But all you need is one crazy person to ruin your entire night.
Yeah. And I think about it for a regional too. It's like, I am not disappointed when an actor doesn't make their way out to the lobby.
Hmm.
After their show, you're like, "I totally get it. I know you. I'll send you an email. I'll tell I'll message you on your social to tell you I enjoyed the show, but I get it." You know, it is taxing. I think it's one of those where if somebody does not understand or thinks that someone's just complaining out of privilege or something, they should spend a day
Well, and
artists.
and let's be clear, we're talking about actors backstage. If you're in wardrobe, so you're there through the show, then you're responsible for washing and drying the costumes and sewing up any tears and
Yeah.
sending out the dry cleaning. You can be asked to stay another 4 or 5 hours into the middle of the night. There are many wardrobe people who take the costumes home with them to do the wash at home. They're up all night. And if your show is running for months, these people aren't getting any sleep either. And if you're a
Mm.
manager, payroll is often on your day off. And you have to pay them to send it in on a Monday in order to get the paychecks by Wednesday, so you can hand
Yeah.
everyone their paychecks as required by the union on Thursday or Wednesday if you're a musician. There are different union requirements. You have to turn it in. So if Monday's your only day off in a week, you're working on your seventh day and not getting paid for it. It keeps producers. Lord knows in my current role, I am learning this is nonstop. The
Yeah.
producers are making decisions. They are having meetings. They're figuring out how they can save $5 or whether the tour is going to happen in 3 months or 5 months, or how they're paying back investors and how much they're giving. They are never alone. So why, it's not what they teach you in college. It is not, because in college you get to go to classes, then you get to go to rehearsal, and you get to say, "Oh, isn't this exciting? For we have a weekend of doing the show, and people came out and applauded, and then I can go back to classes, and you're done." It doesn't work that way in real life.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I was
forgive me, but I just want to go back to pandemic time. So all of a sudden, while everyone understands what they're giving up for the art, and they're praying to have a job doing this, even if it's abusive, all of a sudden they find out it doesn't exist. And there's nothing else they can do or nothing else they want to do. So now we've come through a period of time where we're finding out that writers are under even less demand than they were before, that there are less theaters looking for new works. The theaters that used to have 7-show seasons are now having 3-show seasons. So there are less people being hired for shorter periods of time. And all of a sudden we realize, wait a minute, I was doing this because I was loving the abuse. And now nobody wants me, right? That's the PTSD. We are no longer have to go to an audition live. You have to send in a tape, which means you have to build your own studio. You have to light it correctly. And as someone who talks to these casting directors, they notice when the lighting is off. I don't know what that has to do with whether an actor can act, but for them, when they have to make a decision of, here are 40 people, I need to bring in the top 3 to see the director. If the lighting's off, they just don't ask them in. That's horrible. So
I think the funny thing about it is that as a community, we resisted all of these things for so long instead of trying to incorporate them in some organic way. And when we were forced to use them, we had to come to terms with the convenience of it. And now those are things that we don't want to change per se because now it worked as we reluctantly, moved in that direction. Also, when we did that, we cut back resources. And so it wasn't just like, "Oh, no, we're doing a virtual or we're doing, you know, video submissions because of the pandemic," but then you said to yourself, "Well, I don't need the 3 or 4 people that I had supporting me at the auditions that were in person." And so now you don't have those people anymore.
right.
It's like as soon as we take something out, it never comes back, you know? It's like because once you realize that you can do it without that expense, you won't try to bring that expense back. The question is like, why? If we've already made it work without it, why would we bring it back just for the sake of, you know, what?
And the word that you used at the beginning of our podcast tonight was community. And it doesn't mean, look, if we can save a buck and AI can replace an actor, it will happen but it still comes down to, we want human beings to be with other human beings. This is our version of church. And we don't have this mythical God, and it's not meant to be a comparison, but we don't have this image of there's a rule book. It is, we are all working together towards one goal, and that is to create an entertainment that takes us out of ourselves and shares the moment with a bunch of other people in a room. That part hasn't changed, whether it's Oklahoma, the first time it happened, or Showboat going all the way back decades before that, or whether it's Company, or whether it's maybe, oh, I don't know, and Juliet. They're all exciting moments on stage that have variety and have human beings using their creativity. And that's what excites us, I think.
But do you think it's harder? Do you think we're making it harder on ourselves to maintain this sense of community that was somewhat fantastic to begin with?
Explain yourself.
So, we're trying to make space for everyone. In all of our decisions, we're thinking about, is there a way to be more inclusive? Like, if you think about for a high school or maybe even a college, like when they produce a show, they're trying to put everybody in the program
Mhm.
in it. And they can do that because they're not being paid. The artists aren't being paid, but they get to participate. When you're looking at money, it's hard because the money is a factor. Like everyone's heart's in the right place. The money is not in the bank. So it gets hard to say, we're just going to do this development program because 6 people helped us make it happen. And so we'll just do that, even though we can't, because of the way things are now, we can't pull the right people in the room to see this work, so the work's not being seen by people who can actually take it to the next level because of they're in this PTSD of like, I used to do that, I'm not doing that now for many reasons. Like my family, my job is pulling me away. Like I can't go to these things like I went to them before because they stopped going to them. And now it's hard to get back into the swing of that.
Well, two things in response that I can think of. One, s- not counting school, theater has always been both the community and art and money. That's not changed. It's both. It's not one or the other. It's not a priority on one or the other. I will tell you that I had the joy of being the company manager on Steppenwolf Company's The Grapes of Wrath on Broadway, which had over 40 people in the cast of a drama. And there were millions spent on that show. It had a rainstorm for 22 minutes. Unbelievable stuff. The Schubert organization knew that show could not break even though we did become the Tony winning best show. And the show did make money many weeks that it ran. But they saw this is going to help our industry. It's a larger picture. Now, Broadway is different than nonprofit, is different than schools. We all have variations on a theme, but nonprofits need money. Broadway needs money. Off Broadway needs money. Everybody needs money unless you're in school because that's part of their programming. But we don't worry about the money as we're training people. So it is a learning curve when you get here. So, okay, you have that. The issue is, I know I can think of ways to, oh God, I'm not trying to be political, to rearrange the money so that we could do more of what we used to do with less angst. I can think of it. Doesn't mean anyone wants to follow my idea, right? But where are the discussions? I've always arguing with that. There are people much more brilliant, much more connected in theater than I am. As much as I don't want to admit to that, having written The Business of Broadway.
But do you think, I think the other side of the pandemic, the other thing about the pandemic is that we're not necessarily speaking with the same voice like we were before.
Interesting.
Because on this side, everybody was like, I know, for instance, in our community, we would get groups of companies together and say, what can we do? Like there's
Ex-
no one coming to save us. It's just us. So what can we do? And then there are companies that have greater means, but their struggle is different, although equally as justified as someone whose
but
resources
excellent,
are
excellent point. Because again, talking about what the pandemic did to us prior to the pandemic, and the community is still the word I'm going to jump back to. Here in New York, there were restaurants in which we all knew when a show was over. If you wanted to see other people in other shows and talk to them and hang out and just communicate, we knew we could go have a drink or a snack. They're all demolished. They're all gone. There are
yeah.
now tall hotels in their place. And no one replaced those particular restaurants. There are
So
one or,
long, Theater Row Diner.
well, Westway, but
I know.
the diners have not replaced that. But
Yeah.
there are certain, the West Bank is trying. We used to have in the early days, a place called Curtain Up. Terry Moore's was right across the street from the Broadway theaters. You could find anybody in that place every night. Joe Allen's tried to stay that way in Restaurant Row on 46th Street. And it's now pretty much tourist. There are still theater folk that go there, but you'll see a handful of them. But it's not a hangout. That's the part that we're missing. People go home after the theater. They're tired. They've
Yeah.
rehearsed, even after the show was running, of course, there are rehearsals on your afternoons off. It's not like you just go home and do whatever you want. So, uh,
This always gets me about an unabridged production.
what?
You're like, "Your show is how many hours?"
Yeah.
It doesn't start at 7, it starts at 8, and it's 2 hours, 45 minutes. By the end, you're not going for a late night bite. Also, as I mentioned, like, the Theater Row Diner doesn't exist anymore. In Philadelphia, we had, um, we had a string of diners called Midtown. There was, like, Midtown 1, 2, 3, and they're a all closed, but where they were in the city, they were sort of keeping the city alive at night. It was like there was a place for people to go. Everybody doesn't wanna get drunk all night, you know?
Also,
Sometimes you just wanna sit somewhere and have a cup of coffee or have a slice of pie.
and in the old days, there was a thing called the Equity Lounge. It still exists, by the way. There's still an Equity Lounge. It has a different feeling. It feels, forgive me, it feels corporate. You go in there, you are there for a reason, and then you leave. It could be an audition, it could be a meeting, it could be an interview, and it is their security to make sure that somebody who doesn't belong there doesn't sit with you. What used to be next door to the Equity Lounge was a snack bar. That's out of business, right? Now you literally go there just to do your business. There used to be an equity call board where people who were subletting their apartments because they were going on tour. And you could find a great price because actors trust other actors. And they'd say, you know what? I'm only going for 2.5 months. I got to find someone willing to take these months. And I don't want a stranger. I want someone in the business. And guess what? Somebody coming right out of college would need it, and they'd get a good price on a place until they could find their own. And this was constantly part of our day to day life. None of this exists because the housing for actors is online and it has to be official and it has to be watched carefully because online you can't stop anyone. You can have a password, but that could be anybody.
Well, this is kinda what I was saying. Our business is about gathering in person, in real time,
Hmm.
and I think it's what makes it a little bit of a challenge for us to continue to move forward. Like, that mindset is not evolution. It's it's why can't things be the way they always were? I mean, we felt like that at the beginning of the pandemic. It was like, we are not looking to pivot. We want people to come back to our theater. Instead of saying, like, they can't be here right now, so let's do the equivalent of making great art and meet this moment.
Right. But what you said was the equivalent. And the part that has not come back and has not been put together is that commingling, that live community spirit in the industry. We may
Yeah.
have been able to put the shows on again, and there's still wonderful actors, and we still see each other, and we like each other, and blah blah blah. But there isn't the same humanity amongst us on a daily basis that we and that's it's not saying it has to be what was. You know me, I'm very much against what was. I'm trying to move forward. The part I'm trying to
Yeah.
keep is the humanity part of it, because that's what made the hard work worthwhile, and that's the part
Yeah.
I'm missing. Believe me, I've thought on my own to make up, let's meet once a week at 10 o'clock at night. We're going to go to this particular place and send it out over the internet. Let every actor know about it. Put up a sign backstage everywhere. I know how to do that. But do I personally want to be responsible for supervising a get together when restaurants and bars and other theaters with lobbies exist? I don't.
Yeah.
That's on me. I prefer to be working on new shows, not to be the social host for everybody in the industry. So how do we find that way to do that?
Well, it's crazy to think of how long ago this was, but before, showscorer.com
Mhm.
became a website,
Mhm.
there was a meetup group that came out of
I
meetup
remember
dot
that.
that was like Broadway Lovers Meetup Group, and they bought a block of tickets. They announced it to their group. The group bought those tickets. They came to the show on that date, and they were also encouraged to join them at a bar afterwards to unpack and talk about the show. That wasn't the bar doing that. That was individuals deciding, like, "We wanna create that community," and so I think
But I'd be
somebody has to do.
but there are 2 things with that. I'd be interested to know why it no longer exists.
I think it became show score.
It did, but that aspect of show score doesn't exist. The getting
Yeah.
people
I
together,
don't.
it doesn't. But the more
Yeah.
importantly, that's for the audience. I'm talking about for those of us working in the industry. It used to be
Well, I
that if
yeah.
you wanted to see a star or better a performer, didn't have to be a star, you knew where, as an audience member, where you could go and you could sit at the table and point at somebody and go, "Hey, maybe I can get their autograph." You had a place to go. You had multiple places. Doesn't exist.
But that wasn't an organized effort.
No, it wasn't. That's the point.
It just happened, and it became like a thing that whispered down the lane that you knew.
But I'm suggesting that we don't organize it, that we actually, there has to be this is the part that I'm missing. Where do
Yeah.
I hang out with everybody that's already my friend rather than invite them to lunch or dinner, which I do? But that's a few at a time. I just want to know when I go see a show, I know where those people are going to hang out. They may not all be there, but I know.
That is a that is a very good point. And I do think, so, like, for example, there's a theater company that has a great restaurant partners list, right?
In Philly, you're
There's a
talking about?
handful of. Yeah.
Okay.
Or any theater that has a restaurant partners
Okay.
program, like, "Hey, you can go there with our ticket and get a discount, blah, blah, blah." But none of those places are specifically the
Hmm.
hang.
That's right.
Walnut Street Theater used to have there was a bar around the corner called Coco's, and it is now, called the Craftsman Saloon or something like that. But that was a place where unconsciously, if you were at Walnut Street Theater afterwards, it's like, "You gonna go to Coco's?"
Hmm.
And it was just sort of a, "Yeah, yeah, I'm gonna go get a drink, and I'm probably not gonna stay long." It was that thing. And you kinda knew after a show closed at the Walnut that if you went to, you might see some of the artists in the show. You're right. I feel like there are some theaters that just sorta exist in a space alone. Like, maybe that's part of a whole economic development conversation that, like, this theater is coming up. Can we get a restaurant, a cafe, you know, to come into the space with them or the area around it? Because if there isn't anything nearby, like, for example, I worked at Theater Exile in South Philadelphia. While they do have there's a corridor in that area where there's a lot of shops and restaurants and various things. There isn't one that's specifically the haunt, or like the place that the artists go to. And I think the closest thing we have here in Philadelphia is the bar above Plays and Players Theater, which is called Quigs. That is a space like what you're talking about, but there should be more of those spaces
Well, and especially
because.
here, what again, one of the things makes New York unique is we are in the Broadway district is walking distance to all the theaters in the Broadway district, and there are hundreds of restaurants and bars in that area, making most of their money from tourists, but none of them, to my knowledge, have specifically said we're going to be. And we used to have them. McHale's, by the way, every stagehand, every musician, after every show, especially between matinee and evening, went to McHale's. When a manager or an actor was invited by a stagehand or somebody backstage at a show to McHale's, it was an honor because you're hanging out with everybody that knows their worth backstage on Broadway. It was their haunt. Then there was the actor place. They were all within 3 blocks of each other. So you could
Yeah.
pop back and forth from one thing to the other. You could get discounts if you were in a show, not the audience. This was to encourage you to spend your time with our community.
Yeah.
And then the audience would hear about it, those who were in the know, right? And
Yeah.
that would help the restaurant. We have none of that. I'm thinking, I cannot think of a single place except West Bank, which is not in the middle of the district, that still exists. They have been knocked down and kicked out. Edison Cafe, it was a diner, part of the Edison
Yeah.
Hotel. That there are more Broadway deals, business deals that were done in that diner. It's part. Neil Simon wrote a comedy about that diner and a business deal that was done in that diner, and that is now gone. It's now some other deli or something attached to the Edison Hotel. All of these
The
places that are our history are gone. I'm not saying let's go back to history. What has replaced them? Where's our warmth, our telling each other we care about each other? That's the PTSD. We came out of a war and we're all going home on our own to lick our own wounds instead of sharing them with each other. And if bitching is involved, great. You bitch about your show, anybody you want, but you're doing it with each other, right?
Well, I think this is part of, well, two things. One, the infrastructure didn't exist. And so the artists found it. Like, the Edison Cafe wasn't set up to be Broadway's go-to place. It became Broadway's go-to place
Uh-huh.
because somebody went there, made a deal, and then kept going back there. It's just like every time a new coffee shop opens, some members of the community claim it as their own and it becomes their own place. But as they disappear, it's like, well, how did that even form? Like, how did it even happen? When you think about like the infrastructure that supports our industry is dwindling as well because people aren't thinking about like there's a theater around the corner. I should open up my shop here and let the theater know that we're here. Things are opening and they might just think the theater is not going to generate any business for them, or their place isn't a place where you can sort of park and exist there. It is interesting, like when I think about a lot of places I go to see theater, is there somewhere nearby that we always go to that's like a go-to place? You know, and I do have go-to places, but they're not particularly for my after theater or pre-theater, my prefects
Right.
or my post-theater shows. And who knows? Maybe it's something like we have to reinvigorate those the prefects. We have to bring back the prefects, but it's not a community-wide effort. It's sort of like these individual things. And maybe if the turnover of artists that are working with us is so consistent that there isn't anybody to really onto it to say "We always go to every show after a show here, we always go to this place."
Well, I just want to do a
Interesting.
shout out. Not going to embarrass him with a lesson. Craig used to be the host at the Barrymore restaurant. People went there. By the way, Craig is now an usher at the Winter Garden Theater.
At the Winter
At the
Garden.
Winter Garden. That's where he ended up when they knocked down his restaurant. He didn't own it, but because Greg was a theater nerd galore, everyone went to see him. He was at that door. Hey, he knew everyone's name. He sat him down and, oh, do you need this? Oh, by the way, oh, they're over there at the bar. He was that person that made that place belong and made you feel like you belong there. Right? That is what a restaurant needs to do. It's more than just saying, hey, we have to find our own place. Somebody's got
Yeah.
to say, you're welcome here and we care about you. And the place was packed with both tourists and theater folk. So, on that note,
I think we need a lot of new theater lovers, and maybe we're due for it.
yeah,
The reason all that faded away is because we're starting a conversation now, and perhaps we need more of those hardcore theater lovers to sort of rise to the top again and hold those things intact.
It'd be nice.
I hope those listening in a space where we have the ability to comment and chat, let us know if you have somewhere that you go before or after a theater show, so that we can compile a list or at least have an idea of like
where we can
where we
go.
can
So
go.
I know
Because I
these
know these
places
places
still
still
exist, but
exist,
you're
but you're
right.
right.
That is
That is
something
something that's missing that wasn't particularly part of your contract per se.
And let's add to that, there are restaurants, tons of them in the Broadway area, that will cost you a $60 meal a night. We're not going there. Like I said, if
Mhm.
you get your Broadway
Yeah,
contract and you can make as much and you're making 2,700, but you're taking home 1,600, you're going home to eat or you're going to find the cheapest thing you can,
yeah.
right? So that's part of the problem is that
It
everything
really
is
is the
expensive.
savvy of artists now.
Yeah.
The savvy of artists now, like, I thinking about it in the festivals too, they already know how to get exactly what they need and not get swept up in the nightlife of the festival because they're here working.
Hmm.
I've definitely heard that when I went to Edinburgh. I hear that in the Fringe as well here in Philadelphia. Yeah, these are all interesting changes that, the mindset is different, but perhaps there's change coming.
And on the positive note, we still love what we're doing.
Mhm.
We just want it to, we want the good parts back and we want to fix some of the parts that didn't work in the first place.
Yeah, so in 2026, we are going to resist everything that's trying to dismantle us. We're going to fight for our traditions because they are the foundation of what makes what we do so valuable, so meaningful that it's a calling for us and we can't lose sight of that. In no matter what is trying to pull focus.
hold
These are
dear.
the things that
We
we
hold
we hold
dear.
dear and we keep them tight. So remember, it's the people. We are a community. It's the people and engaging with those people that make
Everything you
everything
see
you
on
see on
stage so
stage so
wonderful.
wonderful.
When you
When
see a
you see a
show and you're
show and
like,
you're like,
that
that
team,
team,
they're like
they're like
family
family
like
something,
they're
like they're
so in
so
tune
in
with
tune
each
with
other.
each
It's
other, it's
because
because
they have
they
these
have these
moments to come
moments to come
together.
together, outside of the work and really make meaningful connections that shine through on our stages. And so it's just something to keep in mind as we move into 2026, that we're not going to lose sight of those things. We're going to continue to hold those things that really kept us together to make sure that we don't let them go. And that's the business of theater, a working title. I'm Darnell
I'm
Bradford,
Mitch Weiss.
and we'll see you at a theater.
Yay, yay.